What's up, everybody? It's Dan, Binder Boneyard, coming at you from the parts room. This is day 2 of the open house extravaganza. Just been having a good time. Yesterday was exciting. A lot of people here. Today, I got my friend Mark Lake from Battle Mountain, Nevada. He's a IH enthusiast. Been a good friend for a long time. You know, I appreciate the friendship and of course the business that you've sent our way. So, thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Appreciate it a lot. So you've been into internationals a long time, I'd say.
Yeah.
So give us a little bit of a history. I think, didn't it start with your dad?
It did. Yeah. My dad came home with a 1973 Travelall to replace his Lincoln Mark III as a tow vehicle for a 32-foot Silver Streak trailer. And it was like, I don't know if I've ever seen the movie Long Trailer, but it was that kind of thing, trying to pull this big old trailer with this Lincoln, which had enough power but passenger car tires. And we made a trip over Whitebird Switchback, and that was the last trip with the Lincoln, and he came home with this Travelall. Unfortunately, it was a 1010 with passenger car tires. So we took it to Detroit, and I think we went through 2 sets of tires, and the tire shops kept telling my dad, hey, you need a heavier duty tire. Well, that'll ruin the ride. So that was my introduction to internationals.
So you drove it from Battle Mountain, Nevada to Detroit, Michigan?
Yes.
Pulling the trailer?
Pulling the trailer.
What year was that?
1975.
Oh, so I can't imagine the fuel mileage.
Oh, probably 7-8 miles to the gallon.
So do you remember how it was set up? Was it a 392?
It was a 392 with the 727 transmission. I do, the one distinct memory that I have from that, other than we couldn't hardly pass a gas station or a tire shop, was my mom kept complaining that the floorboards were hot. And we got out someplace in Nebraska, I think, and it had melted her shoes. Yeah, that checks out. I've been in several of those situations where the floors just get really hot for whatever reason. Usually when you're running them hard, you know, the exhaust systems just heat up. So that's funny. So that was early 70s. So I don't know how old you were at that time, but when did you end up getting your own? Well, that Travelall sat for 3 or 4. We used it my dad used it to tow the trailer, and then he kind of he lost his interest in RVs. So the Travelall sat for about 4 years, and we were building a new grocery store, and we needed some argon gas, I think. There was something that I had to go to Elko and get, and that Travelall had been sitting for 2 or 3 years. Jumped in it, turned the key, and it fired right off. I thought, well, this thing's kind of cool, you know. I remember, also, I was out of high school by then, but one more early story about it. I wanted to use my dad's Lincoln for senior prom. He wouldn't let me use it. I got the Travelall. So I was kind of pissed all this time about, that thing. But then, a few years go by, and it started up in 1983, and it started right up. Well, it's not that bad. But by then there was a little bit of rust showing through in the rear quarter panel, and I thought, oh man, that's too bad. But he gave it to me when I got married, so I inherited that Travelall.
Okay.
And come a couple years later, my wife's 9 months pregnant with our firstborn son, and there was a friend in town and said, let's go for a ride. So we hop in the Travelall, start it up, drive it from our house to the store, and there's smoke coming out from underneath the hood. Opened the hood up, and it burst into flames. The carburetor was leaking. There was at least 3 or 4 cracked spark plug wires that were grounding out. So it caught on fire, so I grabbed a fire extinguisher, put the fire out, fixed the leak on the carburetor, as if that wasn't sign enough to stop, and we took off with the Travelall to the hills. And we got out there, got a flat tire, and I don't remember now if there was no jack or no lug wrench, but for some reason we couldn't change the tire. So I don't know. We were rescued by some drunk kids came by and told us we should be smart enough to have a jack, and said, "You're right, man, but thanks for the ride." So it's true. Every international begins with an adventure.
Yeah.
And that's how it started. And then I found my first Scout abandoned along the road by the Comfort Inn in Battle Mountain on the east end of town. It was just sitting there, and I thought, well, I should probably get that. We called it 5-tone. It had like 5 different colors were on there. I brought that home, made it run, and kept that. And then the next Scout I got is the one that was the movie star in the end. And I got it, and it had a seized engine. We put a new engine in it, and that's where they started. I had a Travelall in there at one point that came from the junkyard. The motor was locked up, and we fixed that and made it run. And the steering box was bad, and I had a guy change it. And I took it from downtown Battle Mountain, where the Mexican restaurant is, and tried to take it to the store. And the steering box was went the wrong way, so it steered in reverse. Opposite. Yeah, I drove it for a half mile like that.
Jeez. Yeah, I get those calls occasionally where that'll happen. Someone will buy a reman steering box from whoever, and it's the wrong orientation, and it steers backwards. And yeah, it's a trip for sure. That's funny. That's a funny story. I don't think I heard the initial 1010 breakdown story. That does make sense though. It always seems like you're prepared. You're like, oh, I got the spare, I'm good. And then you get somewhere and you're like, oh, I don't have the jack, or I don't have the lug wrench, or whatever. So yeah, that happens. It doesn't happen to me as much anymore, but early on, yeah, I would make those same mistakes as well. Well, even on this trail ride, I don't know what, I'm so used to all of my recovery gear being in the Scout all the time that I don't even think about it. And then I took it out for the winter because I just don't leave it in there. We get up to the trail ride on Friday, I get stuck, and Jeff was going to winch me out, and he's like, throw your strap out. And I reached for my strap, no strap. And I was looked back, and all of my gear was not there. And I was like, oh, I know where that is. It's at home, because the Scout had been in storage and whatever. So yeah, even the seasoned pros, I forget stuff sometimes. But yeah, it does. It happens to the best of us too. So, but now you have a Travelall. So you don't still have the 1010, do you? No. So what happened? Where did it go?
Well, I said so the other part of this, there was a kid that worked for me that was kind of a mechanical genius, I think, really at 16. He was pulling bodies off from Scouts and switching them. He got a Scout, and his dad had a 75 D-Series pickup. It was a 4-wheel drive. And they were both pretty cool, and that kind of happened at the same time that I got my first Scout. And then the other story on the 1010 is we ran it off the road one time and pushed the right front wheel back far enough that it tore the pocket on top of where the torsion bar holds. And instead of pulling the engine out and replacing that pocket, we just kept welding it, and it kept splitting, and it finally got so bad it broke completely. So we parked it, and that engine and it had rusted. The rear quarter panel had rusted pretty bad, and so I just parked it at my buddy's house, and it sat there for a month or two, and then he blew an engine up in his Scout. So he pulled the 392 out of that, and I told him, I said, you better make sure the valley pan cover's not leaking on that, because I think it is. Well, he ran it. It lasted a day, and he blew it up in his Scout. So that's what happened to the 1010. And it was at the house where that body that you've got now, it was there, which the other Scout that you have that you're working on was there too. That was kind of the place that had the graveyard of internationals in Battle Mountain.
Yeah, more than one.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, you always wonder about those too. Like at the time when you use them and you're just driving them and stuff happens, you're like, oh, I just have to move on to another one, and you get rid of it. And then later you go, probably should have kept it just for historical purposes.
Yeah. Yeah. If I could have done that over, I would have kept that 1010 because it was fixable. It would just, all it would have taken is find a new pocket and put on there. And that upper piece, I think they were probably available still in the 80s. Or there was, we could have fixed it, but I did. So I guess the cool thing is I found a 1972 Travelall in Las Cruces, New Mexico that didn't have very many miles on it, but it had sat for 25 years. And it was quite a challenge getting it going, and you've done some work on it. But the cool thing about it is it smells exactly the same as my other Travelall. It even has the same squeaks in it. So it really is like a time machine. The turn signals sound the same. The engine has the same sound. They both have 392s, the same. I swear, the same squeaks from the rear seat.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, it's funny. I was talking to Jeff about that, about the squeaks and the rattles and how they all were so similar because his Travelall did it too, and that kind of thing. So it's funny to hear those similar stories across the board. It wasn't just one particular truck that had that problem. It was all of them pretty much, that all needed that fix. No, that their New Mexico one is a nice one. That's a nice one too. And I'm not a super fan of 1010s. Like I'm not a station wagon guy. I'm not a car guy. And so the 1010s are pretty much cars with a weird body.
Yeah.
But like we have this one that Josie's been driving a little bit that's up at the other yard, and they're comfortable.
They do ride well.
Oh man, they do. They ride after driving, the Eagle truck or even the green Chase truck around, and then you get in the 1010 and it's just a, rolly. You go around corners and it just leans over, and you're like, it's the worst for handling. But yeah, they do ride nice, and they're, I don't want to say luxurious, but as far as internationals go, the 1010s were the nice ones.
Well, and I'm sure that's why my dad wound up with that 1010. They probably tried to sell him a 1200, and I don't know if he ever would have ridden in it, but I'm sure because he was a Lincoln guy. Mm-hmm. There was no way he was gonna sacrifice that soft car ride for a truck. Travelalls were supposed to do the work. It did. Just the tires had a hard time with it.
Yeah, and it's funny how much those accessories will change how a vehicle works. Just a simple tire change can make the difference between handling a load or not.
Yeah.
And people think of those 1010s as station wagons, and so they put car tires on them, or too light of duty stuff, and they are work trucks. I mean, you can still work a 1010. It's got the same rear end that the other half tons had. It's not like it. Yeah, the front end is an independent, but the rear end and the drivetrain, 392s and 727s, they're all heavy duty enough to do plenty of work. So it's kind of a weird amalgamation of car and truck, and I don't know. Like I said, I'm not a super fan, but I definitely enjoy them occasionally. I don't think I'm going to be a 1010 guy anytime soon. But I do have over here next to the shop a 62 100. So that has the independent front end like a 1010. It's a little short box truck. I might do something with that just because, it looks good low. They do look good, lowered. They're already super low. That's the other thing with the 1010 of Josie's. Like, I fall into it. Like, you open the door and you have to
duck down to get into it. Yeah, exactly.
Slide into it. I don't know how you do it because you're a big guy, so you have a heck of a time getting out. I'm sure. But so that's the one downside to those lowered rigs is just falling in and climbing out. But I don't know. I might do something with that short bed 100 if I don't sell it before I get to it. But So, and you mentioned the grocery store. So that's kind of you own a grocery store in Battle Mountain. And so, you still have the 56 the big truck?
I do. Yeah.
So you use that for display?
It's display. I drove it to the store and the brakes failed. One of the rear brake cylinders got a leak in it, and I pumped it up and got it to the store, and so it's been sitting there for a year and a half. But we use it for display piece. But that's probably the coolest vehicle I have right now. I think in some ways. I mean, it's neat. I love that Art Deco dash, and the interior of it's in good shape. The seat's not in very good shape. The mice got into it, but I looked for that truck while I watched it sit on a farm south of Battle Mountain for 25 years. And finally, the guy just about gave it to me. I kept asking him, hey, can I buy it? Can I buy it? Can I buy it? And by the time I got it, it had sat for 10 years. But I got it running, and it runs good. I drove it to Elko, surprisingly.
Okay.
It will go 65 miles an hour.
Wow.
That's top speed, and that little six-cylinder in that is just silent at idle. But you get it up over about 40 miles an hour, and it sounds like an airplane engine in the front. It just screams. I think it probably tax out at 3,500, but it's got a governor on it.
Yeah, and some of that's fan noise.
Yeah,
I've noticed that too. The fans, those fixed steel fans with a big angle, just howl, cut that wind, and so some of the noise you get is just mechanical fan noise.
Yeah, I'm sure that's part of it. It's got a 2-speed rear end, so and it'll pull Immigrant that's about a 7% grade at 48, 49 miles an hour.
Wow,
so pretty impressive for. A truck that size. It's a big old truck.
Because it's a S. It's a 56.
S160. Yeah.
So 12-foot or 15-foot bed or
15-foot bed on it.
Yeah. Do you know what they did with it on the farm? Just a hay truck?
Just a hay truck.
Yeah.
It's got. Have you seen it with the stakes on it? It's got a stake bed on there.
No.
It's pretty cool.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'll probably get to see it next week when I'm down there. But is the roof still round?
Yes.
Because most of those hay trucks, the roofs are collapsed in on them from hay falling off.
No, this is in perfect shape. There's very, very, very little rust. I don't know if there's any perforation rust in it any place. It's cool. It's got a train horn on it. But I can't find a 6-volt compressor for it, so you have to fill the air tank on the side. But it's pretty cool.
Huh. And there's no air compressor on the engine?
No.
No air driven? Huh.
No.
Huh. Yeah. No, that's cool. I always liked the 50s work trucks. I mean, I had an S100 that was low, had little tires on it and stuff like that. It had 3 on the column with the overdrive, which kind of worked, but not really. That was kind of fun to drive. But the thing about the S cabs, well, all the LR and S, is, in my opinion, the roof is too high. And so it's got this weird bubble roof thing. And I don't know if it's to clear your cowboy hat or what the whole...
I think they were built for people like John Wayne.
Yeah, real tall. And so the proportions look strange.
Yeah, because they're narrow and they're tall.
Yeah, so in a S100 that is already short bed and it's low on the ground, the roof is a foot too tall.
Yeah.
But when you get into the bigger trucks, or even like my 56 120 out there, the 4-wheel drive one, it's lifted. It's got a little bit more size to it. You don't notice the high roof as much.
Yeah.
And then same with the 160s or Bare Knuckle Binder has his 4-wheel drive one that he drives all the time. The proportions look correct. It's almost,
once they're up in the air, you're right. I mean, it's still the same dimensions, but they're lifted.
The eye, just the way it strikes my eye, they're just different. And so I like the S trucks, but they got to be 4-wheel drive. They have to be bigger.
Well, maybe International. They've always built farm stuff. They probably, the pickups were an afterthought. They stuck those bodies on that and said that'll work.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's hard to say. I know they use the same cabs for a lot of stuff. Or even like my R190 with the sleeper cab. You don't notice the roof height on that, I think, because the fenders are so big.
Yeah.
And then the extended cab for the sleeper. Because like that truck looks right. Like the cab, the proportions, everything about the 190, in my opinion, it's perfect to me. You know.
Yeah, it's definitely a good looking truck.
It's got a neat look to it. So I don't know. I feel like automotive design in the 50s, they were still learning. You know, and International, they were building farm equipment. Their truck division probably was influenced more by the farm side than anything. And, you know, they're like, oh, well, Chevy just came out with a car with all this chrome. And they're like, put chrome rings on the headlights of the 56. You know, it's like, there's minimal chrome. You know, yeah, the dash is kind of cool. I really like the L and R dash. The gauges that have the little IH on the needle, like that's cool, because the 56 just has a green circle. I'm not a fan of that. I think when I get my 56 on the road, I'm going to put R, you know, with the IH gauges in it. It just looks a little neater to me anyways. I don't know. Maybe they're too expensive to make, and so that's why they went away with it.
Could have been. Probably, yeah, trying to save money.
Yeah, I don't know. But so what else? We got Scouts. So we're working on one of your 74s now that's getting pretty close. Talk about the Movie Star Scout. Tell that story.
So Movie Star Scout was one, I think I mentioned it before. I bought it from a guy and the engine was seized. And so I put a new motor from International in it. I don't think it was new. It was a long block assembly. It was remanufactured, but it came from International Harvester. And we drove it for a long time. I mean, years and years and years. And it started to develop some rust in it. And I was like, we're in Nevada. Why is it doing this? But one of the spring shackles broke when Michael was in high school. And it pushed up through, it just came right through the floorboard. So it sat for a couple of years, maybe 3 or 4 years. And I took it down to a shop, and they fixed the bolt, but they didn't fix the hole in the floorboard in it. And so it sat again for a long time waiting. I was looking for parts for it. I found that you could get sheet metal, and it kind of needs new floor pans, and I think up front on it needs that. But anyway, that's where it sat. But in between the time that I bought it and got the engine in there, they made the movie Joyride, and they sent out casting call for extras and for vehicles. And I remember we had a Ford Taurus SHO and a new Expedition, and my wife went, and she never washes cars, but she washed those, and I think she waxed them, and she sent those pictures in. I said, it's a spooky show. They don't want new cars and that. I said, send them a picture of the Scout. She said, nah, they don't want that. Well, they called, and they wanted the Scout. So we went out. This movie, if you don't know, starred Paul Walker, and I don't know the other guy, Steve. It was his stunt double who rode in the Scout, but we spent a day going up and down Interstate 80 between Battle Mountain and Button Point, west of Winnemucca, filming for Joyride. And the director walked by. We were lined up out at Valmy, and the director walked by and said, "Nice rig." And I knew we were in the movie then. And our whole claim to fame is like this 2-second scene in the movie where you can't even really tell it's a Scout. It's just kind of a blue blur that goes by, but that's us, and I could hear it. You know, you could hear that engine, that 345, bum, 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 going down the road. So funny. So it's Movie Star. But then the spring broke, and it sat, and it sat, and it sat, and then the 74 that you're working on, how it came back to life is it had been sitting for 3 or 4 years, and we went out to get the 74. No key to it. It still doesn't have a key, does it?
No.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, because we started.
Did you get it?
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
Did you get it? Okay,
yeah.
So maybe we got a key for it. Anyway, so the steering's locked. It's Halloween night. It's starting to rain, and I thought, well, we couldn't get it on the trailer. We didn't have the right equipment to use a come-along to pull it up. So, well, we'll just drag it to town. So we made it a couple hundred yards. All 4 tires went flat. So I called AAA, and they came out and they got it, and the guy looked at it, and he just laughed. He said, okay, I'll tow it to town. So, not to disappoint my daughter Amy, we went to the Shell station where this Scout had been sitting for 2 or 3 years again. Jumped the battery, turned the key, and it started up. So she drove it for another 2 or 3 years after that.
After you put tires on it?
Yeah. Put tires on it and fixed the brakes, and she drove it up until the time you picked it up and brought it up here.
Yeah. That's right. We got it from her house. Yeah. No. The Scouts, they always have the recoveries on those things. It's, they always are. They're never easy. And when they are easy, you get nervous because you're like, oh great, what's going to happen going home or something like that. And so, I don't know, that 74 is a good Scout. I'm glad that we're getting it together. So future. We have the fire truck.
Got the fire truck.
That's after we finish the Scout, then we're going to move on to the fire truck, which was a runner, sort of a driver. I think it needed some brake work, if I remember right.
Yeah. I think it's going to need tires, doesn't it?
Yeah, it needs tires because they're the old split ring, 20-inch. They're like 920s I think they're 920s, which I don't even think they make that size anymore, or if they do, they're kind of expensive, but they're all on tubes, so we're going to have to approach that one when we get to it. But are there any other internationals that you've been eyeballing around Nevada that you want?
Well, I have Frankenstein. Remember that?
Oh yeah, Frank. Yeah. So for folks that don't know, we built a truck for Mark a few years ago, C-Series. It had no bed on it when it came in.
No
right?
bed. It had a flatbed, and between the time I bought it and went to get it, they took the flatbed off from it.
Yeah. So C-Series truck needed pretty much all the axles gone through, needed the motor gone through. It took a bunch of work. And then after we get it going, we discover that it has a non-synchronized transmission.
Yeah.
So we figured out that someone took a Lodestar drivetrain, motor and transmission, and put into this C-Series truck. And so the first time we go to drive it, I can't shift it because I'm not a truck driver. So realizing that there's no synchronizers. So you still drive it around, right?
I do, yeah.
So you have to remember how to do it. And
well, it's not, you have to double clutch it. But the worst part is second and reverse live an eighth of an inch apart from each other. Okay. So you're never quite sure. I'm never sure if it's in reverse or second gear to take off. I'm always like, yeah.
That's funny. Yeah. So Frank's a good truck.
It needs power steering.
Yeah, that's that. Yeah. My whole cookbook with C-Series trucks is power brakes, the power brake kit. Even if you keep the drums, just having the power brakes makes them so much more drivable. And then the power steering conversion.
Yeah.
Those
that would be, in Battle Mountain, it's not too bad with it, and you get it on the highway and it's fine. I've not taken it off road because one of the hubs isn't locking in, but I would be fearful of too much on that. You'd break your knuckles for sure if you hit a rock hard. But power steering is a necessity, I think. I took it to Grass Valley, drove it. We trailered it there. We trailered it and drove the Travelall. And I made the mistake of taking it from Jeff's place or the forest or wherever the rally takes place into town, and driving that around Grass Valley was a nightmare with those big mirrors and then no power steering and trying to parallel park it. It was like, no, it's got to have power steering. Yeah, and it's the older I get, the more I wish like my red truck had power steering. And it's on our to-do list. I have a pump for it. I have the bracket. Like I'm ready. I just stopping what we're doing to put power steering on it. So it's on my to-do list too. And every customer truck we do, just about, I really try for the power steering. I don't think we mentioned it much to you because you'd already put a bunch into the rest of it. And the power steering conversion on C-Series isn't a cheap date. No, because there's quite a bit of stuff to do, right?
Oh, yeah. There's all the parts and everything. It does add up pretty fast. So, but no. So I know you got Frank. So you got a Scout, You'll have a
I've
nice
got that little Scout. Yeah, and I've got that little Scout.
The 800. That you got tanks on order for that.
Yeah. And my D-Series pickup, I still have that.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. I don't hear much about that one. Is that the one with the really leaky transmission?
No, it's just the parking. The parking pawl is broken on it. The transmission works great. There's something wrong with the motor. It's missing a broken valve spring or something.
Yeah.
I'm afraid to take it apart to see.
Yeah. Sometimes it's a can of worms.
Yeah, it misses and it comes back. It could be, maybe it's just a valve lifter, but if it's that, is the cam gone too, or just a collapsed lifter? Who knows,
Yeah, they'll flatten out a lifter, or they'll flatten out a cam lobe if the lifter starts going, or if the valve spring, if stuff's just rattling around too much.
Yeah. Well, it comes in, it'll miss, and then it doesn't. It comes in and out. So it's still at the point where so I don't drive it very much.
Yeah. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, you got quite a collection, I guess,
Well, then I bought my new International too, except it's called a Ford Bronco.
Yeah. No, don't say that. No.
It looks more, I tease the Ford guys. It looks, to me, honestly, it looks more like a Scout than it does a Bronco. I like it. It's a good rig, and I'm not disrespecting anybody. That Ford copied International to build the Broncos to start with, and I think it's pretty cool. There is more Scout design in that than there is Bronco design.
All right, I haven't driven a Bronco. I've only been around a few of them, so you're right. They do look very Scoutish, more Scout than early Bronco.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know. Any thoughts on the future Scout, the EV Scout?
I don't know. Living in Nevada, electric vehicles don't make a lot of sense to us
because of the distance.
Yeah, the distance, and I don't know how you solve that. I think there's some cool advantages to electric vehicles. I mean, instant torque and that kind of stuff. But then there's the weight of the batteries, and you're on an off-road rig. I don't know how that all works out, but yeah, electric vehicles for us in Nevada, the distance is a problem. And I just can't imagine sitting in McDermott at the grocery store to recharge my batteries.
Yeah.
For that seems a deal breaker to me.
Yeah. Well, and just the Scout side of it, to me, it's neat. I like that they're reviving the brand, sort of, but what we're used to is a different vehicle than what they're going to be making, and so I don't think it's really apples to oranges. So people ask me my opinion, and I'm just like, either way, it's like asking me what the new Rivian, how I feel about that. It's like, same thing. So I don't know, but anyway, well, I think we're getting down there on time, so I appreciate you sitting down with me. Thanks for telling some stories. It's good to hear some of that history, because I mean, we've been friends for years now, and some of that stuff is still, I don't hear, it's neat to hear some of those things. So it's interesting. So if you're ever in Battle Mountain or passing by, what height was it, 80?
Highway 80. Yeah.
Yep.
Halfway between Salt Lake and Reno.
Yeah. Visit the Midway.
The Midway Market.
Midway Market, because you're midway between Reno and Salt Lake. Visit Mark's grocery store. You'll see his Internationals around town there. So you can't miss them. There's the whole street's full of them. So
yeah, you just drive down Broad Street, you'll find them.
Anyways, well, thank you everybody for following along. All the likes, the subscribe, the shares, all that stuff on the social medias. I really appreciate. And for Mark Lake, I'm Dan from Binder Boneyard.